It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Whatever the man might or might not think is unimportant. If he moves into a new neighbourhood, the surrounding families consider him the rightful property of one or other of their daughters. He is a prize to be won, and so the race begins. Mrs. Bennet of Longbourn was a mother of 5 unmarried girls. When she heard that a wealthy man was soon to move to the grandest house in the county, she acted swiftly. Bursting into her husband's library, she called, "My dear, Mr. Bennet, Netherfield has a new tenant. His name is Mr. Bingley, and he moves in before the month is out. What a fine thing for our girls!" Mr. Bennet barely glanced up from his book. "How can it affect them?" he said. "My dear, naturally, I am thinking of his marrying one of them." Mr. Bennet turned the page. "Is that his reason for settling here?" "No," Mrs. Bennet confessed, "but he may fall in love with one of them, so you must visit him as soon as he comes, at once, before Sir William Lucas or any of our neighbours. It will be impossible for our girls to make his acquaintance otherwise." But Mr. Bennet, who took a curious pleasure in teasing his wife, refused. She persisted, saying he must call on Mr. Bingley for the sake of their daughters. Mr. Bennet promised only that he would write their new neighbour a note. "I'll say he's welcome to marry whichever of them he chooses, though I must throw in a good word for Lizzie." Provoked, Mrs. Bennet exclaimed, "Lizzie is not half so handsome as Jane, nor half so good-humoured as Lydia, but you are always favouring her." Mr. Bennet, who considered at least 2 of his 5 daughters to be as silly and empty-headed as their mother, said, "Lizzie is quicker than the rest." "How can you insult your children in such a way?" wailed Mrs. Bennet. "You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion for my poor nerves." "You mistake me, my dear. I have a high respect for them. Your nerves have been my old friends for more than 20 years. As a young man, Mr. Bennet, captivated by her youth and beauty, had married a woman whose ignorance and folly soon put an end to any real affection for her. Though his wife's silliness often amused him, he preferred the company of his books. Mr. Bennet's character was a complex blend of sarcasm, reserve, and odd eccentric little quirks. 23 years of marriage had not been enough to make Mrs. Bennet understand him. Her own character was simpler. She was neither sensible nor well-informed, and had an unreliable temper. The sole purpose of her life was to get her daughters married. Her sole interests were fashion, finery, and gossip.